I'm Diana McPhail, President and CEO of NextFifty Initiative. Welcome to Conversations with NextFifty Initiative, our series about the opportunities and challenges that many older adults encounter, as well as the work being done to improve the quality of life for older people around the nation. NextFifty Initiative is a private, Colorado-based foundation funding projects and programs that improve the lives of older adults and caregivers. Today, we're excited to chat with Gary Officer, the President and CEO of the Center for Workforce Inclusion. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you very much, Dana. Great to see you this afternoon.
Likewise. You know, you and I first crossed paths a couple of years ago when your organization was a recipient of one of our grants in one of our first funding cycles. And I had the honor of being your program officer, and through that got to know a little bit about you and your work experience and what led you to this point. But for those in our audience who are not familiar with your background, I'd love for you to spend just a few minutes telling us a bit about your background and how you got into the aging space in this work.
I will. I've had a varied career in the social justice space, always trying to find ways of speaking truth to injustice and finding solutions to address inequities that exist across our society. So whether it's affordable housing for people of modest means, whether it's trying to address predatory and subprime lending, primarily geared towards underserved and African-American communities, whether it's building houses and adapting homes for older residents who are aging in place. I have followed the spectrum of issues at leadership. And what's driven my work is a value proposition and a real belief that we have a moral responsibility as a nation. We have a moral obligation as leaders to challenge our assumptions about issues in our community that we've allowed to fester. So at the Center for Workforce Inclusion, our commitment is threefold. We want to address workforce inequities in all of its forms so we can build a fair and just society, an inclusive society that allows every American to live in dignity on a base of their desire to be employed. That's number one. Number two, we are committed to educating the American public through the CWI labs, through interviews, through blogs, through holding our leaders accountable on the many issues and policy issues primarily that we have to begin to address so we can remove the barriers, whatever they may be, for people to be skilled, be prepared, and to be placed into a jobs economy that is now increasingly reliant on older Americans. And number three, we recently formed the American Workforce Coalition. It's still very much in its nascent form, but we are committed through a network of 20 large national organizations to challenge Congress in a bipartisan way to support bipartisan solutions that will enable older Americans through the federal system and the federal appropriations to receive the funding that they need through local organizations to be reskilled and upskilled so they can perform in jobs that are increasingly automated and therefore not left out of an evolving economy. That's what we do, and we do it with passion, commitment, and a sense of urgency.
You know, I was going to ask you a little bit to expand on what the work that Center for Workforce Inclusion does, and you touched on that a little bit, but wondering if you could also talk about what the Center for Workforce Inclusion is doing to increase access to employment opportunities for older adults.
We have a menu of programs primarily funded through the federal government. We are the largest grantee of the U.S. Department of Labor under a program called the Senior Community Service and Employment Program, otherwise known as CSEP. We use those funds, like you use your dollars, to identify local partners across the country, fully vetted, in diverse communities, rural, urban, suburban, and we fund them primarily to build localized programming that helps over 4,000 people transition into employment through a federal program. So we then dig deep into those communities to find that story, to find that organization, to identify those critical success factors that we know exist on a localized basis. Because what happens in Denver may not be the same as what we experience in Charlotte. The history is different. The jobs market is different. The leadership matrix may be different too. So we try to figure out locally what are the critical mixes that will enable us to provide the support for our local organizations, to seek funding from public and private sources to fill those gaps, and to drill deep with programming and support so we can get marginalized groups back into the workforce. That's number one. Number two, the aging community, the aging workforce community and the groups we serve are not monolithic. So today, the focus you see increasingly is on diversity and inclusion, all because of what happened in Minneapolis 2 years ago, right? But 2 years ago, the issue was veterans. And what we should never forget is that the needs of older Americans should not be marginalized or categorized in favor of one group over the next. Because there are LGBTQ issues going on, there are veterans issues going on, there are gender issues going on, there are racial issues going on. So we have to make sure that our solutions are not based towards one group over the other, but that our solutions can benefit all, inclusive philanthropy. And I've seen your list of grantees, because I do my research too. And again, you should be credited for the diversity of organizations and responses that you have funded to enable the organizations that you support to better serve their communities. But primarily, we are an advocate for older Americans who are 55 and over.
Why have employees in this age group not returned to work? Do you think it's by choice, or is there something else going on?
COVID-19 has accelerated us into the future at a pace we never could have imagined. 2 years ago, I had never heard of Zoom. Never heard of Zoom. And then it was scary, you know, if you're ever in Denver on these dates, would you mind popping by my offices or to our studios to do this interview? Now you're saying, do you have a time on your schedule to do a Zoom interview, right? That's how much things have changed. But what we do know is this. Many jobs have disappeared because of COVID. I'm in a building right now near Washington, D.C. 2 years ago, we had 2 parking attendants on every floor going 3 levels deep. Now there's 1, and the garage is empty. We had all manner of stores and delis around this office. They're closed. And the likelihood of them reopening is not very high, right? We had so many older Americans who were cashiers, they were employed in frontline jobs. And because of COVID-19, they were either laid off, decided to take early retirement, or said, I've had enough. I've had enough. So that's the reality on a certain level. Then you have what I call the compact between corporations and their employees. And now I'm going to become a little bit more global here. Because in the other industrialized nations around the world, Canada, Britain, Germany, and the like, the relationship between management, corporations, and the employee is one of support and trust, right? We will take care of you if you take care of us, and we're all in this together. In this country, that compact is broken. When a person says to their bosses, I need Monday off because I must take my grandchild to dialysis, that employer says, you can't do that because I don't think it's necessary, which happens, by the way. The employee says, you know what, I've had 2 years to think about this. Go away. My life has value. My life has purpose. And I have a family. So a lot of folks in the workforce have voluntarily exited the workforce. They've had time to think about the meaning of their lives and how they want to be treated. And for many older Americans, that's been the reality: the disappearance of work, certain kinds of jobs, and how they want to be treated as on a humane basis. So that's one. The challenge, however, of getting these older Americans back into the workforce is twofold. One, many older Americans are scared to go back to work. Right? Every 3 or 4 weeks, there's a new COVID variant out there. So why go back to a public-facing job and then risk and take a bus and a train, right? And then perform in a public-facing job that leaves me exposed to the latest variant of the COVID virus? Why do that? And many have said, I'm too scared to go back to work. For another group of older Americans, the issues are more pertaining to occupational barriers. If you live in a primarily rural community in this country, let's say South Carolina, that state has a 38% broadband coverage. For an older person to apply for a job now, you have to go online. How can you go online to apply for a job and work remotely if you have no access to the internet? And the reality, again, is according to the Commonwealth Fund, right, prior to COVID, about 2% of our nation's workforce performed in a virtual or remote setting. 2%. Since COVID, 56% of job seekers, according to the Commonwealth Fund, have said, I'm looking for a job that allows for remote or virtual access. Now we get to training. To work remotely and perform virtually, you're going to be trained on the use of technology. You have to be more digitally literate. And so now you have another issue of training, right? And so in the call for workforce justice, we have to make sure we have the resources to train people to work remotely. Because now employers are saying, I will allow you to do that. But to do that means older people have to have the tools too.
What can communities be doing right now to bring more older people, and specifically older people of color and formerly incarcerated individuals, into the workforce and ensure that they have the necessary skills and tools?
That's a complicated question, and I'll try and simplify my response. So the issue for me is twofold. We have, regrettably in this country, a culture that doesn't value aging. So communities can do as much as they can to prepare. When we send someone to a job interview and someone decides that this person doesn't fit my Friday evening happy hour crowd vibe, right? Then the discrimination factor kicks in. So we've got to change culture. We've got to change how we think and value people who are older, just like we do in Japan, just like in Holland and other nations. So culture has to adapt to how we view, appreciate, and value older people. The other thing to think through is how we think about, not just on the local community level, but on a national level, how we advocate for national resources. The US ranked 10th of the 11 Asian economies when it comes to workforce spend. We spend like 0.25% of GDP on workforce expenditure. Singapore spends like 3% of GDP. What's the difference? Last year, unemployment went from 3 to 26% in the US between March and May of last year. Singapore maintained full employment. They continually trained and retrained their folks so that if something happened, the workforce was resilient enough to continue to perform and be compensated. Of the OECD nations, only Mexico ranked below us, in workforce expenditure. Everybody else invests significantly more than the United States. That's the problem. Number 3, we have these big stimulus packages out there. What does it mean? It means that we're trying to use public expenditure to address historical deficiencies, historical mistreatments of vulnerable communities, of vulnerable groups. So the Build Back Better is essentially a human capital investment compared to other countries. No other country has invested the amount we're investing through a stimulus package as we are, because they have invested over time. And as they open up, their population have been absorbed back into the workforce. It hasn't happened here. So localized advocacy for the needs of vulnerable groups in our community is what we have to do better. And there's no country in this world that is better at grassroots democracy and grassroots activism than in this country, because it's buried in our DNA. Number 4, we have to build a new set of paradigms in the local community. Workforce organizations cannot speak in isolation on the issues of workforce development and not fully engage the business community, not fully engage with community colleges, not fully engage with private philanthropy. Because I bet you my bottom dollar right now, the community foundation in Denver, I guarantee you right now, invest probably 2% of their grant making on aging programs. How do I know? It's the national average. We're going to stop talking about the needs of older people through a social service program platform mindset and begin to speak about the needs of older Americans as a moral imperative that drives economic outcomes. Why? If we fully employ older Americans at their full capacity in this country, it will add 15% to our GDP. And as our population ages, the GDP will increase proportionally because we have more people of a certain age in the workforce. We cannot afford to discriminate against them. So this is not an issue about program. This is an issue around this nation's long-term economic prosperity. And older workers cannot be ignored.
So in Gary's perfect world, if you had a magic wand, what steps could be taken to change some of these issues that we're seeing and make the shift in culture that is necessary?
Well, Dana, you know me very well, and I'm not one for lacking in passion. I want the same passion I see in other networks in this country. There's a reason why we have the most sophisticated nonprofit housing development network in the entire world. They speak as nonprofit leaders, but they advocate as local business people, right? There's a reason why we have a credit union system that's combating payday and predatory lending. Because these nonprofits are functioning as nonprofit cooperatives, but they're acting as bankers. Philanthropy will only respond to us if we up our game and shout and be persistent and be bold. And we've challenged you guys in our various applications because I don't believe in incrementalism. If there's one thing that COVID has taught us is that we have now a unique window in our history to fully break from our past, to think about solutions informed by research, informed by observation, informed by need, and to build a response to all three that will drive change. So we have to up our game. We can't be incrementalist. We've got to be bold. We're going to push the paradigm. We're going to ask questions of ourselves and then ask questions of you. And you know, Marian Wright Edelman, who's a magnificent social justice pioneer who I read all of her stuff, right? She had this quote that I use a lot. And she says, you know, we have to help people visualize a future they haven't seen, right? So you ask the question, what in my ideal world should the future be? We've got to build a response to the needs of the agent community in ways that will help them, the end user, help the organizations that are providing services to them to visualize a future they haven't seen.
In that vein of visualizing desired future and hope, can you talk about a partnership or project that CWI is involved in and what excites you about it?
I can, because you guys are funding it. And there goes to the point of the catalytic nature of philanthropy. We're working with you guys, and we use the grant that you have generously supported us on to fund an organization in Yonkers, New York, by the name of Greystone. Greystone has this thing called Open Hiring Platform. We will take you, regardless of age, regardless of your history, whether you've had a police record, been to jail, whatever it is, we're going to train, we're going to prepare you, and we're going to hire you and bring you back into the workforce. We're going to take you through our training, and if we can't find a job for you here, we will find a job for you through one of our corporate partners. Open hiring, removing the barriers that has limited and impeded the ability of the most vulnerable, many of whom have made mistakes. But their philosophy is, one mistake should not change your life. Because the redeeming purpose of man, woman, is that you can recover. You can succeed if you're given the tools and the opportunity to do so. And Greystone, I hope you guys look that organization up and read our report on our progress, is an amazing organization doing phenomenal work, helping the most vulnerable. And I take great pride in tracking down, identifying, and engaging that group, because they're onto something that could be a national model.
Gary, this has been so inspiring, and thank you for taking the time to chat with me today and share a bit about yourself and the work being done at the Center for Workforce Inclusion. It's incredibly important work, and the reach that you have across the country and the impact that you and CWI and CWI Labs is having is phenomenal. So again, really appreciate you taking the time, and thank you for all that you're doing.
And I'm profoundly grateful to you, Diana, for your leadership. I'm a big fan, as you know. The NextFifty is a tremendous institution doing great work in such a short period of time. I wish you well. I wish your colleagues well. I wish your trustees well. And I hope that next year brings all of you happiness, calm, and peace.